I am the concubine's daughter of the Yongning Marquis's mansion. No one knew that every night I was sent to the dragon bed in the palace through a secret passage. Finally, one day I got tired and asked for a status. Lu Huichuan held my hand and paused. The concubine is pregnant. Let's wait a little longer. I closed my eyes. It was true that they said my aunt was the most favored one in the harem. Later, when I returned to my uncle's house, my aunt asked me, holding her handkerchief, "I have chosen a marriage for you. You will be the second wife of General Pei Sheng. Do you want to marry me?" After a moment of silence, I nodded and said, "I will marry you." 1. When the news of concubine Song's pregnancy came, everyone in the Yongning Marquis's mansion was in an uproar. The old lady personally accepted the imperial decree of reward, her hands shaking with excitement. This is a great joyous event. I wonder if the queen is well. The eunuch who announced the decree smiled and helped the person up. With His Majesty here, the queen is fine. The emperor is very happy that the concubine is pregnant. He also heard from the empress that there are many young ladies in the palace, so he gave these many rewards to the concubine and let the young ladies share them. As he spoke, he glanced at me imperceptibly. I stood in the corner, feeling completely listless. I hadn't slept all night and was called to the courtyard to wait for the emperor's order. I could hardly stand. Fortunately, no one noticed. After everyone left, I followed the crowd back to the main hall. The old lady was still in an excited state, and hearty laughter could be heard from time to time. Yes, the Yongning Marquis's mansion is dwindling in talent, and the family relies on the daughter of the imperial concubine to support it. Unfortunately, the imperial concubine has been favored for many years, but has no children. Now that she is pregnant, she is naturally happy. The stepmother also came over to flatter him. The queen is pregnant. If she gives birth to a prince, the girls will have such a noble concubine aunt and a prince cousin, and their marriage prospects will be even better. As he said this, he patted his elder sister, who was staring at the gift beside him. Following her line of sight, there was a set of gold and gemstone headpieces, inlaid with tiny pearls, which sparkled and was very eye-catching. This is a tribute from the Western barbarians. I have seen it at Lu Huichuan's place. It was dim at the time, with only the night-shining pearls on the crown gleaming faintly. Seeing me in a daze, he smiled and kissed me. "Silly girl, you look like you've never seen anything good before. I'll give it to you later." Now, in order to appease me, he gave me the gift. But this good thing may not be mine. As expected, the stepmother smiled and had someone deliver the headgear to the stepdaughter's room, while teasing her timidly. "The things sent by your aunt are naturally for you, the stepdaughter. Why are you looking so eagerly at them?" Finally, I took a few pearl flowers and 2 boxes of rouge back to the yard. Yenner was the only maid who knew the inside story. She held the box and felt sorry for me. "Madam, you are so mean." The emperor clearly wanted to give some to the young lady, but in the end all the good things went into the eldest lady's yard. I rubbed my brows without saying anything, preparing to take another nap. I never expected to get this set of headgear. Lu Huichuan is the emperor. How could he not think of these? But I don't want to think too much about it. Since he can't give it to me openly, giving it to the mansion would be a way of showing his gratitude. It's just to seek peace of mind for myself. 2. Lu Huichuan and I met at a palace banquet. He was drunk and mistook me for the imperial concubine. At that time, he and the imperial concubine had a quarrel, so I became her substitute. He refused to give me a name, but he also refused to let me go. Every night during those days, I was taken to the dilapidated temple in a small sedan chair, then blindfolded and taken through a tunnel to the dragon couch. Even after he reconciled with the imperial concubine, he still came to pick me up occasionally. From calling me the imperial concubine by her given name to calling me Qiao with great emotion. I think he has me in his heart.
You want an identity.
I am a girl from a noble family, without chastity and protection, so I have no choice but to enter the palace. But he still rejected me, saying that the concubine was pregnant. But I don't want to wait any longer. I've drunk so much contraceptive soup. If I continue like this, my body will be ruined. I want to get married. I want to take a gamble and marry into a good family. I went to look for my aunt. My aunt picked out many candidates for my marriage. I have my eyes on General Pei Sheng, who is stationed at the border. His wife had died, and he had a son and a daughter at home. He came to Beijing this time to seek a successor from among the concubines in the capital. Many women dislike the border being too far away and are unwilling to marry. But for me, marrying far away is safer. Not long after, the aunt brought news that General Pei was preparing to come and propose marriage. She smiled and comforted me, telling me to be at ease and prepare to be a general's wife. I nodded, feeling a little worried. This is when the accident happened. On the day when General Pei proposed marriage, his stepmother promised the fourth sister. My face turned pale, and I staggered to the main room to ask why. Just as I was about to push the door open, my stepmother's voice came faintly out. I've thought about it for a long time, and I think it would be safer for Ah Qiao to be your concubine. Your fourth sister is very thoughtful. I'm afraid you can't control her, but Qiao can make some arrangements, and her biological mother is in the mansion, so she won't dare to do anything. This was followed by the unwilling complaint of the eldest sister. Mother, Ah Qiao is very good-looking. I am afraid that she will attract the attention of the second prince. It's nothing. It's just a pretty vase. Why do you take it so seriously? Be more generous and don't be unhappy about the marriage your aunt has arranged for you. Only then did I know that the Imperial concubine asked the emperor to marry my eldest sister to the second prince, and my stepmother wanted me to be my eldest sister's concubine. Originally, they favored the fourth sister, but when the time came, they changed their minds and married the fourth sister to General Pei instead. Miss San, why are you here? A call interrupted my thoughts. As the door was pushed open, my stepmother and sister looked over at me in astonishment. I lowered my head and heard my own dry voice for a long time. Mother, I want to marry General Pei. Presumptuous. My stepmother's anger was predictable. She stood up and stared at me coldly. Marriage is a matter of parents' decision. How can a daughter decide on her own? Since you have heard it, I will not hide it from you. I plan to let you marry the second prince as a concubine. The old lady also knows about this. You are a concubine, and it is an honor for you to be the prince's concubine. I looked up, feeling suddenly annoyed. His dark eyes were ambiguous, and even his voice was slightly sarcastic. Are you serious, mother? If I enter the second prince's residence, I'm afraid the second prince will never be able to take the throne in his lifetime. You will regret this. I don't believe that Lu Huichuan can have a good face when looking at the prince who stole his woman. Apparently, they didn't understand what I said and thought I was cursing the second prince. The eldest sister angrily threw the things in her hand over. Only then did I notice that she was wearing the night pearl headdress. The tiny pearls shone brightly as she moved. I was locked up, and only my aunt came to see me once. She bit her lip, as if she had made some kind of decision. Ah Qiao, I have discussed this with your fourth sister. She wants to marry the second prince. How about you marry her on the day when General Pei comes to pick her up, and she will become the second prince's concubine in your place? Is that okay? I was stunned for a moment, and my heart was deeply moved. My aunt loves her daughter dearly, but I can't let her get into trouble. Besides, I have made my decision. I shook my head gently. Mom, I will marry you. Since they want me to provide a dowry, I will oblige them. I also want to know how Lu Huichuan felt when he saw that I was his son's woman. Can you still bear the nausea and tell me to wait a little longer? The bird on the windowsill was still circling, and when it saw me approaching, it landed on my palm. I smiled at it and said, "Tell your master that I agree." It chirped, spread its wings, and flew away. 3. I was not released until the day I got married. It couldn't be said that she was married. After all, she was a concubine, dressed in pink, riding in a small sedan chair, and included in the 108-cart dowry of her eldest sister. When my eldest sister and the second prince entered the bridal chamber, I was waiting at the door. A flash of surprise flashed across his dark eyes, and then he looked at his elder sister, his voice so gentle that it dripped with tears. No outsiders should be present on our wedding night. After saying that, he turned to me and said coldly, "Get out." I retreated quietly, and before leaving I saw my eldest sister blushing with joy under her veil. As for the marriage, I can see that the imperial concubine and the second prince have reached some kind of agreement. The second prince wants to be the crown prince, and the imperial concubine wants to find someone to rely on for her child. And the eldest sister is the link of this transaction. The second prince is expressing his sincerity to the imperial concubine. The next morning, I went to visit my elder sister. She has a charming face and looks like she is soaked in a honey pot. Looking at me, she looked down at me and said almsgivingly, "I will go to the palace to pay my respects later. You should come with me." Although she is a concubine, she is still a daughter of our Song family. I can't let others say that I treat my sisters harshly. I nodded in agreement. When she was not around, the second prince sneaked up to me, held my hand with ill intentions, and winked. "I will go to your room at night. Remember to wait for me." I smiled and said nothing. When we entered the palace, the imperial concubine was not there, so the second prince took us directly to the Yangxin palace. Lu Huichuan is writing. A man in his 30s does not look old. The way he holds the wolf hairbrush and writes with it shows the demeanor of a master. The whole person was in the solemn Yangxin palace, dignified and cold. "Your son and his wife and concubines come to pay respects to your father." The second prince knelt down immediately. Lu Huichuan said, but didn't raise his head. Seeing that his elder sister was too frightened to speak, the second prince poked her with his elbow. The elder sister spoke cautiously. "Your son Song Yuanzhu pays homage to the emperor." Lu Huichuan paused with his pen and looked up at her. Putting the wolf hair aside, he walked around with interest and said, "You are the legitimate daughter of the Song family. Do you have several concubine sisters?" The eldest sister's breathing slowed down a bit, replying to the emperor, "I have 3 concubine sisters. The third sister accompanied me to marry into the second prince's mansion as a concubine. She also followed me this time." As he said this, he turned around and called me softly, "Hurry up and greet me." Lu Huichuan was slightly startled, and his tone was a little strange. "Third sister? Isn't it the fourth lady?" As he spoke, his eyes shifted towards me. At my elder sister's urging, I looked at him deeply. Seeing his body stiffen instantly and his pupils tremble with fear, I kowtowed calmly and spoke word by word. "I am Song Jinxiao, paying my respects to the emperor." His incredulous voice rang out above his head. "You said you married my son?" I still answered calmly, "Yes." The second prince was confused and asked in confusion, "Father, do you know each other? What is your relationship?" Bang! The sound of something heavy falling to the ground. Lu Huichuan's eyes were red and bloodshot, staring at us fiercely. Behind him, the writing brushes and ink on the table fell to the ground. He pointed at the palace maids with a trembling finger and said, "Get out of here." Soon there were only 4 of us left in the hall. The second prince lowered his head and dared not even breathe. The eldest sister was trembling with fear. I was the only one with a blank expression. Lu Huichuan almost laughed out of anger. He picked me up, pressed me hard against the wall, and lowered his head to kiss me. He was like a savage beast, loudly asserting his ownership. After a long while, he wiped the blood off my lips, looked at his second prince grimly, and said to the ground, "This is our relationship." The other party was struck by lightning. The blood drained away from his face, his fingers trembled, and he was speechless, as if he had seen something that subverted his worldview. The eldest sister couldn't bear the fright. Her eyes rolled back and she fainted. After a while, the second prince fell to his knees with a thud, crying and shouting, "Father, spare my life. Father, I really didn't know that Miss Song San was your woman." Lu Huichuan was furious. "Get out." 4. I was taken to the dormitory. Lu Huichuan's eyes were bloodshot, and his face was terrifyingly gloomy. "Song Jinxiao, he doesn't know, and you don't know your own identity either?" I took a step back, breaking free from his shackles, a sneer escaping my lips. "My identity? What identity do I have?" He raised his eyebrows slightly. Are you blaming me? I turned my head away and suppressed the sobs that were rising in my throat. I dare not. I am just a weak woman. I dare not disrespect the king, nor do I dare to disobey my parents. I don't know where the emperor got this from. He stared at me for a while and finally smiled. He pulled me into his arms and said softly, "Okay, you are even angrier than me. I know you have been wronged. I also heard that the dowry was for the fourth young lady, but I never thought it was you. I was negligent." I struggled so hard that I threw myself into his arms and started crying. "I am your son's concubine. How dare you touch me?" His eyes were dark and he held me tighter. His voice was a little hoarse. "Ah, Qiao, you are mine. I will not let you marry anyone else. I will find a way to deal with this matter. Don't worry, the second prince and his men won't dare to touch you." I raised my head, tears welling up in my eyes. "When will you let me enter the palace?" He paused and frowned quickly. "Ah, Qiao, please don't make things difficult for me." I didn't ask any more questions, but hugged him with understanding and said, "I understand. I'm waiting for the emperor." In the corner where no one pays attention, the smile does not reach the eyes. On the way back to the second prince's mansion, my elder sister was still in a coma. The second prince's eyes were fixed on me, his expression was complicated, and he seemed to be hesitant to speak. I opened my half-closed eyes and said, "Your Highness, what's the matter?" He said in a deep voice, "You are actually my father's woman. I thought there were 3,000 beauties in the harem, and my father only cared about the Imperial concubine. It turns out that he has a concubine in private. Do you know how my father looks at me?" He narrowed his eyes slightly and said in a rather sinister tone, "What a pity. The concubine who came to my door cannot be touched or touched, and my father hates her for no reason. The women of your Song family are really capable." I lowered my head slightly. A smile formed at the corners of my lips, and my gentle voice seemed to be separated by a layer of veil. "Your Highness is right. I also think it is a great pity." In the silent air, Liu Ying's breath was slightly choked, and he looked at me in disbelief as if he had thought of something. "What do you mean?" I looked at him. My eyes were misty and vague, and I whispered softly, "The emperor is old. What do you think?" It was not until they returned to the mansion that their elder sister slowly woke up. She was bewildered at first, but when she saw me, her memory came back to her. Her eyes suddenly changed, and she was about to slap me. The one who stopped her was the second prince, Liu Ying. The elder sister widened her eyes in disbelief. "You actually helped her? Didn't you see that she and the emperor?" The unspoken words were drowned in the second prince's cold gaze. He said in a low voice, "If you don't want to die, swallow what you saw today." The eldest sister was so frightened that her chin was shaking and her mouth was opening and closing, but she couldn't speak. After a while, he glared at me fiercely and said, "Are you doing this to your aunt? You still want to be a queen, and you dare to flirt with?" His face changed slightly as he spoke, but he didn't say anything in the end. Instead, he said stiffly, "If my grandmother and parents knew about this, they would definitely not let you go." I calmly watched her changing expression, then suddenly held out my hand and said with a smile, "Are you done? When you're done, return my night pearl headdress to me." She was stunned and quickly took a step back and looked at me warily, mocking me. "Why, you want to steal my things before you even enter the palace? Are you worthy?" I slowly approached, got close to her face, and saw my reflection in her pupils. With a sinister look, "Guess why such a valuable item was sent to the Song family? And guess why the father-in-law who announced the decree asked the sisters to share it? Huh." I drew out the last line of my voice, which frightened her so much that she staggered. She stared at me in disbelief, probably not expecting me to do this to her. Yes, after pretending to be pitiful for so long, one forgets that one's own nature is also tyrannical and overbearing. It's a pity that his back was bent by the hierarchy between legitimate and illegitimate children. That set of night pearl headdress finally came into my hands. It was delivered by the second prince himself, and the look in his eyes was ambiguous and deep. Occasionally she would grab my hand and bring it to her lips, but she didn't dare to go any further. I looked at him with resentment and sorrow, wanting to say something but holding back. I think he understands what I mean. After teasing me for a while, he finally broke his promise and held me tightly in his arms, gritting his teeth and saying, it was obviously him who stole my woman. I reached out and pulled back the heavy bed curtains, the corners of my lips slightly raised. I think beauty is not a useless thing. During these days in the prince's mansion, I lived a very leisurely life. My elder sister kept her distance from me, but when we occasionally met, she would look at me with hatred and viciousness, as if she wanted to cut me into pieces. But I just smiled, looking like, what can you do to me? Which made her even more angry. But I didn't expect that my elder sister, who has always been stupid and outspoken, would actually use her brain sometimes.
5.
The Yongning Marquis mansion is considered a popular family in the capital recently. In addition to the concubine being pregnant, there was also a daughter being married into the royal family. So much so that on the day of the old lady's 60th birthday, the Earl's mansion was very lively. The excitement reached its peak after the Imperial concubine came in person. May your Majesty live 1,000 years. Everyone in the Beau's mansion knelt on the ground, but the old lady was the only one who was about to bow down but was stopped. She was so excited that she was shaking all over. Madam, why are you here? The woman in a goose-yellow palace dress held her up with one hand, while her other hand gently covered her belly. Her eyebrows are delicate and slightly upturned, and every move she makes is beautiful yet noble, gentle yet dignified. This is the most favored imperial concubine of the time, my grandmother's youngest daughter, the younger sister of Earl Yongning, and my aunt. Come to think of it, I haven't seen her for a long time. She was born noble and entered the palace early, so she had little interaction with a humble concubine like me. Even when she thought of the girl from her natal family, it was her sister Xian who came into the palace to accompany her. So when his eyes touched me, he just glanced past them. After looking around at everyone, she slowly spoke. Everyone got up. I came back this time just to see my mother. My father smiled smugly. Now that the queen is pregnant, she still comes to visit mother. This filial piety is beyond compare. The imperial concubine glanced at him and did not respond. I lowered my head. It is said that the imperial concubine is arrogant. Except for the old lady and the eldest sister, she is mostly cold to others. Well, after so many years of decline, the Beau mansion finally had such a golden phoenix, so they certainly have the capital to be proud. After the banquet, the guests dispersed. The old lady and the others took the noble concubine aside to have a private conversation, and I subconsciously wanted to leave. Before she could even step out, she was stopped by her stepmother, who said coldly, "As a concubine, how can you not serve the mistress?" I was in a daze. Yes, now I am even worse than a concubine's daughter. The noble concubine and the old lady have a deep mother-daughter relationship, and the stepmother is also joining in the fun. Only my elder sister sneered at me as I served tea and water, remaining silent. After another topic was finished, my elder sister suddenly gave me a strange smile and then splashed a cup of hot water on my face. Without waiting for my response, she knelt down in front of the imperial concubine, crying, "Aunt, please help me." Water dripped down my face, and I looked at her in confusion. She cried and shouted, "Your Majesty, do you know that my third sister was pregnant before she married into the second prince's mansion?" The whole room was shocked. I also couldn't believe it and looked at her in confusion.
Impregnan.
How is that possible? I had just seen a doctor a few days ago and had deliberately avoided their presence. She was filled with resentment and pointed at me with a shaking finger. My third sister was unfaithful. She had an affair with someone before marriage and even had an illegitimate child. The second prince also discovered this, but he kept it a secret for the imperial concubine's sake, and he became angry with me because of it. After all, my third sister is a daughter of the Song family. I really don't dare to take the initiative. Please ask the queen and grandmother to make the decision for us as husband and wife. The noble concubine's face was slightly tense, then she lowered her head and looked down at him. "Are you Yuanju's concubine?" I was stunned for a moment, looking straight at her, and I couldn't tell what I felt in my heart. Yes. This is the woman that Lu Huichuan holds at the top of his heart. She waved her hands, and several grandmothers dressed as palace maids appeared from nowhere. One held me down while the other grabbed my arm and took my pulse. After a while, the grandmother who was examining the baby nodded and said, "Your Majesty, this girl is indeed nearly 2 months pregnant." I feel like I've fallen into an icy cave. How is this possible? Lu Huichuan and I clearly drank the contraceptive soup every time. The eldest sister continued to cry, "My queen, please give me and the second prince justice. I have just been married to the second prince for over a month. How could she be 2 months pregnant?" The imperial concubine was completely furious. "How dare you? I wanted to befriend the second prince, but you did something so despicable. How can I save my dignity? Someone, drag her down and drown her in the pond." Soon a grandmother grabbed me and dragged me out. I shook my head in fear and tried desperately to resist. The cold profile of the imperial concubine and the arrogant and complacent face of my elder sister came into view, as if I were looking at a dead person. "I can't die." The thought flashed through my mind, and I shouted without caring, "I can't die. The baby in my belly is woo-woo." With her mouth gagged, she looked up to see her elder sister's vicious face. "How dare you mention your adulterer?" After saying that, he looked at his grandmother again and said, "Why don't you send her to the pig cage quickly to avoid polluting the ears of the queen?" Noticing the unhappy look in the imperial concubine's eyes, she smiled flatteringly. "Your Majesty, don't worry. She is just a concubine. How can she know any dignitaries? Your Majesty is an imperial concubine. Who can be more powerful than the emperor?" She half closed her eyes and smiled strangely. "It can't be that she hooked up with the emperor, right?" The noble concubine glanced at me, snorted coldly, and sat down with her sleeves thrown. "She is worthy?"
6.
I was finally taken away. The deep water in the backyard was as cold as ice. I was trapped in a pig cage, flapping helplessly at the fence and sinking little by little. Gradually, the lake water submerged me. Indistinctly, I heard the mockery of my eldest sister. "A lowly concubine's daughter dares to climb the dragon and attach herself to the phoenix. It's simply wishful thinking. Even if the emperor knew that you were executed by the imperial concubine, he would only ask if the empress had a miscarriage and would not even look at you." I no longer want to know what Lu Huichuan thinks. Before I lost consciousness, all that was left in my mind was a thick hatred. To everyone. I feel like I'm dead, but maybe not dead. Because I saw Lu Huichuan again. I saw him rush to the lake in panic and almost jump in, but someone held him back. I saw him anxiously yelling at the people around him, including his concubine. I saw the usually dignified and elegant concubine Guifei panic for the first time. She carefully pulled his sleeve but was ruthlessly thrown away. The arrogant and domineering elder sister was thrown to the ground and trembled with fear. And the second prince, who was standing at the end, stared at the emperor in front of him with a distorted face, veins bulging on his clenched fists. At last, I saw the cage that had been lifted up and myself inside. I was floating in the air, watching them silently. When Lu Huichuan's eyes touched the pig cage, his eyes turned red. His eyes were bloodshot, and he punched the fence. I was released with a lot of blood flowing from my body. Lu Huichuan held me in his arms and hugged me tightly. I heard him murmur, "Ah, Qiao, wake up."
Ah, Qiao, I'm sorry.
I also saw the tears hidden in his eyes. Is he so affectionate towards me? I really didn't realize it. I wanted to laugh, but I found I had no mouth. She could only look at herself being held in Lu Huichuan's arms and moved her non-existent body. It was already dark when I opened my eyes, and I don't know how much time had passed. Yenner cried and called me. "Girl, girl, you finally woke up. Girl, when did I become a girl again?" In a trance, I saw the imperial physician and palace maid standing by. He looks familiar. Isn't this the imperial physician who helped the imperial concubine with her pregnancy? I learned everything from Yenner. It turned out that after I was drowned, Lu Huichuan finally came to rape me. When he learned that I was immersed in a pig cage, His face turned pale, and he ran to the lake without looking back. He rescued me and placed me in the mansion of Earl Yongning. They also sent Imperial physicians and palace maids to take care of me. He gave me a new identity. The emperor said that you are the cousin of the Yongning Marquis and will soon be a concubine in the palace. Yeno looked at me with some joy and was very relieved. Girl, you finally made it. I turned my head to look at the fluttering birds outside the window and smiled faintly. Yes, I finally made it through. At night, Lu Huichuan arrived. He hugged me tightly, as if I were a treasure that had been lost and found again, and his eyes were almost filled with tears. Ah, Qiao, you finally woke up. I just realized how much I cared about you. You don't know how scared I was when I heard that you were dead. It's my fault. I shouldn't have left you out there and made you suffer so much. When you get better, I will take you into the palace. I will issue an edict to make you a concubine. What do you think? I tilted my head to look at him, raising my eyebrows slightly. What if the royal concubine gets angry? What if she hurts the dragon? His expression changed slightly, and he held me tighter. No. I smiled, neither sad nor happy. But the baby in my belly is gone. His eyes dimmed, he closed his eyes and said in a deep voice, "We will have it again." 7. After Lu Huichuan left, it was already late at night. Along with the chirping of birds, a familiar figure appeared before my eyes. He had a mask on his face and was staring at me. I didn't even raise my head. "My lord, are you all right?" The man behind the mask was silent for a moment and took off the ghost mask. It was a handsome face. It was Lu Huichuan's younger brother, His Royal Highness Prince Zhuang. "How do you know it was me?" I said helplessly. "I guessed it, and it just happened to be right." He laughed. "I heard that Miss Song San is only beautiful, but it turns out that it's all lies." I curled my lips coldly and said, "Of course I am not lying. Otherwise, how could I be fooled by the prince? You let me enter the second prince's mansion, sow discord between them, and then let me set up this trap, which almost cost me my life. Is this your sincerity?" He sighed and said, "I came here in person because I was afraid that the third lady would misunderstand me. Lu Huichuan should have arrived when you were just drowned in the pond. Unfortunately, something unexpected happened in the court. I have done my best. I'm sorry, third miss, for making you suffer." I snorted coldly, closed my eyes, and said nothing. We indeed set up this game, with the purpose of making Lu Huichuan regret his actions and then taking me to the palace. I was not pregnant, but I took a fake pregnancy pill to lure my sister into it. Taking advantage of concubine Shang Guifei was actually using this incident to suppress her. The fact that the Imperial concubine came to visit her parents at this time was also closely related to Prince Zhuang. I once asked King Zhuang if he wasn't worried that Lu Huichuan didn't have me in his heart and that his work was in vain. He told me that they were brothers and naturally understood each other best. According to him, Lu Huichuan has not yet recognized his own heart. It was also ridiculous. He could see clearly what Lu Huichuan could not see clearly. I chose to cooperate with King Zhuang in order to avenge Lu Huichuan. King Zhuang promised me that he would give me the status of a county lord and set me free. Of course, I also left him with something to hold over me. But because he didn't keep his promise, I almost lost my life. I have to doubt his sincerity. Seeing my expression change, he did not explain any more, but bowed sincerely and said, "Okay, third miss, I admit that this was indeed intentional. But according to Lu Huichuan's personality, the effect of you really getting into trouble and almost getting into trouble is very different. Miss, please don't blame me for being ruthless. It's just that I'm not in any serious trouble right now. People who achieve great things don't pay attention to small details. Please forgive me and don't let this affect our cooperation." I sneered. I believed what he said, but it didn't affect the unhappiness I felt. Seeing that I was in a bad mood, he stopped talking, looked at me deeply, and walked out the window. I rubbed my forehead, looked at the gradually brightening sky outside, and before I knew it, I fell into a deep sleep. The next morning, the first person to come see me was my aunt. I heard that she fell ill from exhaustion from taking care of me during the days I was in a coma. Now he comes to see me despite his sick body. I haven't seen her for a long time. She has lost a lot of weight. I can't help but feel sad when I think of how much she worries about me. I thought that I would never let my aunt worry about me again. The second ones to come were my grandmother and stepmother. My grandmother must have been ill. Her face was abnormally red, and her rage was even greater. She looked at me, banging the cane in her hand, and the wrinkles on her face were trembling with anger. "You evil creature, how dare you seduce the emperor? You are trying to tear out your aunt's heart." Now the imperial concubine has been treated coldly by the emperor, and even the unborn prince is not welcomed. This is all your fault. How dare you enter the palace and become a concubine to compete for the queen's favor? If I were you, I would have killed myself by doing such a despicable thing. After she finished, I slowly said, "Grandma, why are you so angry? We are both girls from the Yongning Marquis mansion. How come my aunt can do it, but I can't?" Seeing her expression change, I became even more arrogant. Anne is older, not as young and pretty as me. Maybe she can become the queen and bring honor to the Beau family. Grandmother, what do you think? On the day I was drowned in the pond, her grandmother didn't even look at me. She was only concerned about whether the concubine would get sick from anger. Now you accuse me of seducing His Majesty. How ridiculous. You. She was so angry that she couldn't speak clearly. Her face turned red, and she stretched out her cane to hit me. Of course, she couldn't really hurt me. Not to mention the palace maids behind me. Even my stepmother gritted her teeth and stopped her. "Mother, don't be impulsive. She is the emperor's person." I watched them fighting with amusement and laughed casually. "Grandma, don't get sick from anger, or it will be my fault." My stepmother turned her head suddenly and stared at me angrily. "Song Jinxiao, are you very proud?" Only then did I notice that my stepmother's face was extremely pale, as if she had not rested for a long time. "That's right. I heard that my elder sister was sent to the farm by the second prince, and it's unlikely that she will come back." After a long while, I smiled softly. "Mother, I told you that you would regret it. I told you back then that if you rejected my good fortune and made me your concubine, you would regret it." She closed her eyes and exhaled after a while. Her voice was very low, as if she was talking to herself. "You are right, I regret it."
8.
It doesn't matter whether she regrets it or not. The important thing is that I entered the palace. As the cousin of the Marquis family, she became a concubine. There, I met the long-lost concubine Guifei. She looked much more haggard, completely different from the high spirits she was last time. She was explaining to Lu Huichuan again. "I really didn't know she was pregnant with your child. I was just too angry that the younger generation in my family did such a thing, so I drowned her." Lu Huichuan stood with his hands behind his back, still ignoring him. She was about to ask again, but when she saw me at the door, she stopped talking abruptly. She raised her head proudly and said nothing more. When she passed me on her way out, she looked at me for a long time. She looked cold and complicated, as if she was looking at me for the first time. No matter how careful you are, you can't guard against thieves in your home. I didn't know there was such a capable descendant in my family. When you did such a despicable thing, did you ever consider your family members or other people's reputations? I raised my eyebrows, thinking of the old lady's words. They are indeed mother and daughter. I laughed out loud. "Your Majesty is so righteous. I wonder if you ever considered that I am your relative when you drowned me in the pond." He leaned over to her ear and chuckled. "The Emperor suspects that your Majesty intends to kill me. I guess your Majesty already knows who my adulterer is, right?" She was shocked and looked at me in disbelief. The corner of my mouth twitched. "You see, he pretends to be a gentleman, but in fact, Sima Zhao's intentions are already known to everyone. Among them, it was probably the work of King Xing. On the one hand, he hinted to the imperial concubine that the emperor had an affair with me and asked her to come to visit her parents while pregnant. On the other hand, he instructed someone to tell the emperor that the imperial concubine had known my identity for a long time and deliberately wanted to kill me. It not only alienated the emperor and the imperial concubine, but also achieved the plan for that day. Kill two birds with one stone. It's really a good idea. I narrowed my eyes, and my smile gradually faded. Since I entered the palace, Lu Huichuan has indeed treated me very well. The palace maids were bullying the weak and sending all the good things to Zhongsui Palace, making it seem like the imperial concubine was being neglected. Fortunately, she had the baby in her belly to protect her, so she didn't suffer much. Time passed quickly, and the concubine's belly grew bigger day by day. She was always on guard against me, always worried that I would harm her child. Finally, in February of the following year, she gave birth to a princess. The princess was delivered to me at the first opportunity. During the days when she was pregnant, she had already taken over the management of the harem. With the medicines given by King Xing, I fed them to Lu Huichuan every day, which was enough to make him inseparable from me and forget his past loves. The imperial concubine struggled to come out of the delivery room to look for me. She was so weak. Please, for the sake of our relationship, return the child to me. I don't have the habit of snatching other people's children, so I didn't make things difficult for her. The second prince still comes to see me from time to time. He has grown a lot, has grown a beard, and looks gloomy. He held my hand and rubbed it in his palm. Ah, Qiao, she is dead. My brows twitched slightly, and I realized who she was. It's the eldest sister. He smiled sinisterly, his voice carrying a hint of chill. I locked her in a pig cage and threw her into the sea. She was terrified and screamed desperately. I had people throw rocks at her. She was disfigured and bleeding, but she could only watch herself sink. He looked at me, his dark eyes deep. Ah, Qiao, was he in so much pain at that time? I smiled and nodded. Well done, Your Highness. Not long after, I received another letter from King Xing. There were only 4 words on the letter. The wind is about to blow. I looked up at the sky. It was a deep blue. Indeed, it's time for the wind to blow.
9.
The second prince's rebellion came unexpectedly. He was like a ferocious beast, quickly surrounding the entire imperial city. When we attacked Yangxing Palace, I was still feeding medicine to Lu Huichuan. He whipped the medicine bowl away with his long whip, breaking it into pieces. His eyes were red. Ah, Qiao, I'm here to pick you up. I calmly wiped the blood from the debris. You are late. He was puzzled. What do you mean? I looked at him calmly. I'm pregnant. I am pregnant with Lu Huichuan's child. His pupils trembled, and he threw me down angrily. You said you would wait for me. I let him do what he wanted with a blank expression and kept repeating the same words. You are late. You are late. I am no longer the same person I once was. Now I am no longer moved by any sincerity. Lu Huichuan on the bed stared at the scene with wide eyes, trembling as he tried to get down and pull us apart. Ah, Qiao, you guys. The second prince turned around with a bloodthirsty and cruel smile. You didn't expect it, father. Your woman has never loved you. The one in her heart is me. It's you, you stole my man. Lu Huichuan staggered, his face turned pale, and he vomited a mouthful of blood due to anger, and then fainted. I was having my clothes torn off by the second prince when he was stabbed. He lowered his head, staring at the sword piercing his chest, and turned his head with difficulty while clutching my collar. It is the King of Zhuang. Blood flowed from his chest, dripped onto my chest, and spread out into flowers. I kissed his forehead gently and pushed him away. Goodbye, second prince. The warm body fell to the ground, still staring at me, refusing to close its eyes. I reached out and closed it for him, then looked at the visitor calmly. Your Majesty, you are very punctual this time. He drew back his sword and raised his eyebrows. If you are not on time this time, I am afraid that my cooperation with the girl will end here, right? Don't worry, young lady. Now that the great cause is about to be accomplished, I will naturally do what I promised you. I lowered my head, curled the corners of my lips, and said with a half-smile, But what if I don't believe in the prince? He was slightly stunned. What do you mean? I clapped my hands, and a group of black-armored guards quickly rushed into the small hall and detained the soldiers who had rushed over. He was horrified and looked at me in disbelief. Black armor guard, how did it get into your hands? I blinked. Your Highness is a smart man and perhaps a wise leader, but Your Highness should never plot against me. Although my life is worthless, I always want to live a few more years." The prince is used to controlling the overall situation and manipulating others as pawns. But the prince probably forgot that I once told him that cooperation requires sincerity. Since the prince cannot give me the sincerity I want, then I can only apologize to the prince. After saying this, I looked at Lu Huichuan, who had woken up at some point, and said in a gentle tone, "Is that right, Your Majesty?" Lu Huichuan looked at me blankly and nodded mechanically. King Zhuang was stunned. "What did you do to him?" I shrugged and smiled. Of course it's the prince's medicine. I just added something to it. Added something that allows people to be used as puppets. As he spoke, his voice turned cold, and he gave an order. "Prince Zhuang and the second prince are committing treason. Arrest them all."
10.
The chaos ended with King Zhuang being beheaded. All those involved were sent to jail. The court was in turmoil and was reshuffled. The Imperial concubine was also killed in the palace coup, leaving behind a 2-year-old princess. I heard that it was the second prince who brought people to Chongqing Palace to kill. I was dazed, remembering Liu Ying's vicious look at that time. "Ah, Qiao, I will not let anyone who hurt you go." After a moment's silence, I took away the remaining princess. And Lu Huichuan was still lying half dead in the Yangxin Palace. I propped up my head and drew circles on his chest. "Your Majesty's advice to me is really good. The second prince has fallen, and Prince Zhuang has also fallen." His eyes were still blank. "As long as you are happy." I pouted again. "I am pregnant, and the doctor said it is a prince. Your Majesty, can you make him the crown prince?"
Good.
"Your Majesty is in poor health. If you die, who should I find to support the crown prince? Master Zheng, General Su, and Duke Zhang's mansion are all trustworthy people." The night deepened. I asked a lot of questions, and he answered a lot of questions. Where I wasn't noticing, those dull eyes gradually became clear, but were soon replaced by pain, and finally slowly returned to dullness. In the 9th year of Yonghe, the 7th prince was born, and a general amnesty was declared. His birth mother, concubine Shu, was made empress. The following year, the emperor passed away, and the empress dowager took over the government. Grand Tutor Zheng, General Su, and Duke Jiang assisted in the administration. I looked through the pearl curtain at the kneeling ministers, my expression dazed. If I had married Pei Xing back then, would all this have happened? Unfortunately, there is no if. If the world doesn't give me justice, then I can only try my best to seek justice for myself. This is the best outcome I could get.